Hey, this week we're talking about a pen testing distro that's not Kali, AMD's FSR going open source, Redis tightening the noose, Linux has arrived with malware, and more. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 144, recorded Saturday, March 23rd, from Rawhide to Ranchers. Hey, welcome. It is Saturday, and as always, you know what that means. It's time for Linux. Time for the Untitled Linux Show. We're going to get geeky. It's going to be fun. Not just me, of course. We've got the crew. Not exactly the regular crew. We've got David pinch hitting for Rob, who is away on medical leave. We'll put it that way. And he is feeling pretty good, but not quite up to sitting around to chat with us. So we let him have the day off. Good to have everybody here.
Good to be here.
So awesome to be here.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit to talk about. We're going to let Ken kick it off, and we're going to talk about some pen testing. And when we talk pen testing, the distro that normally comes to mind is Kali Linux, but that's not the only one out there, is it, Ken?
No, it isn't. According to Linux Magazine's Jack Wallen, a new kid is in town. I am referring to a pen testing distribution called SnoopGod, which aims to compete with Kali Linux. Jack states SnoopGod is an Ubuntu-based Linux distribution geared for pen testing. It is designed to be fast, easy to use, and provides a full desktop environment to make the tools accessible. SnoopGod includes more than 800 pre-installed libraries and tools. It includes tools like Aircrack-NG, Beef, that's with the second E and the F capitalized, Metasploit, Brute Force-Lux, Brute Spray. I'm going to say this as cool, C-E-W-L, Crack, Potato, Sucrack, Burp Spite, etc. And much more. You can view the entire list of libraries and tools from the SnoopGod GitHub page if you want to find out what they all are. It defaults to the KDE Plasma desktop and includes kernel 6.5, so hardware detection shouldn't be a problem. According to the SnoopGod website, quoting, SnoopGod is more than an operating system. It is a free open source community project with the aim of promoting the culture of security in IT environment and give its contribution to make it better and safer. You can also sign up for various newsletters such as the daily newsletter, podcast, release updates, weekend review, latest articles, and advertising updates. Now, who's going to take it for a spin?
I'm trying so hard to not make jokes here because the name of this distro is so similar to a certain pop music star. And yeah.
I couldn't.
Does it make you want to smoke weed and say things really weird like for shizzle?
Definitely wanted me to sing "A New Kid in Town."
Yeah, I saw that name too, and I thought, I wonder if that was totally on purpose, just to get a little popularity out, name recognition going out there, and
quite possibly. It is a funny name. Like even not just the obvious similarity to Snoop Dogg, but just in general, it's kind of a funny name. And when you look at their website, the website looks very professional, like somebody that knew what they were doing put that together. And it's just kind of a funny incongruity there between the two.
Well, and you kind of wonder when they, Snoop God, that kind of a lot to live up to too. Are they being a little pretentious maybe, or they kind of
maybe
overly proud? I don't know.
At the very least, it is a very Googleable name. I remember one time we had the Scarf project on Floss Weekly, And it's like, okay, well, let's go do some research what these guys are about. It's like, I could not find anything about them because every time I went to search for scarf, I found, the piece of clothing that you wrap around your neck. It's like, well, okay, scarf open source. And I found articles on Hackaday about open source knitting machines. It's like, so Snoop God, at the very least, is going to be something very easy to type into Google and find them.
Just type in Snoop first.
Yeah.
Stop there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then just skip over the first 50 results to find the one you're looking for.
More like 50 pages. Goodness. You would end up way down in the those dark bottom pages of Google. I know this is interesting.
I'm feeling.
I'm feeling lucky. This is interesting. It'll be fun to see how this compares to Kali in the future and kind of what those two streams of development will look like. Interesting stuff. So let's talk now about GPUs. Is this a GPU story, Jeff?
It is a GPU story. And, I know I talk a lot about having Team Green video cards, but I'm not a fanboy of any hardware. I root for all teams so we have good competition and drive prices down and innovation up. But, I am known for running a lot of Team Green video cards because there's certain requirements that Team Red doesn't have for me. But, I'm rooting for Team Red to, really, really bring it to Team Green. They need some comeuppance and rooting for Intel as well. But my story today is about Team Red and their new FSR 3.1 being announced with Vulkan support. So FSR stands for Fidelity FX Super Resolution. So this is a method of upscaling video. The short version for the non-gamers is the higher the resolution of your game, the harder it is to render frames in a game. So to have a good gaming experience, you want more frames so there's less jerking and stuttering in the motion, and you have a smooth gaming experience. Upscaling is just like it sounds. To get quicker frames in the game, the video card will render a frame in lower resolution, and then with algorithms, and I don't know if you'd call it AI in a formal sense, but it scales up frames to the higher resolution that you're playing at it and then displays it. So, for example, if you're running a 2K monitor, maybe the frame is rendered in 1080p and then upscales it to your 2K. So it can actually render everything faster. Now we have 3.1, which is announced, that will bring even more quality improvements along with less flickering and shimmering and less ghosting and better detail preservation. While FSR 3.0 was Direct 3D 12 focused, 3.1 is Vulkan focused. Now the Xbox Game Development Kit will now support FSR 3 on Xbox games. So with Vulkan API support in 3.1, that opens up the possibility that some Linux native games, seeing support. So if Xbox games are developed with FSR Vulkan, it makes for an easier port. The link in the show notes also has a link to the official AMD announcement, which lists games which are taking advantage of 3.1, and they'll give a few visual examples of older FSR screenshots and videos side by side with the new version, so you can see the different changes and see the quality improvement and the smoothness improvement. Now, FSR does work with VRR, which stands for variable refresh rate. So, in fact, they recommend that you have a variable refresh rate monitor while using FSR to make the experience that much better. So what a variable refresh rate monitor does is it changes the refresh rate based on when the frames from the graphics card are ready. So you don't get any tearing, and it makes for a smoother transition. You don't have either half frames, or you don't have a frame that's held too long because of you're waiting for the refresh rate. So it makes a better gaming experience overall, at least at lower frequencies, like below 60 hertz. It's not so noticeable faster than that. Mm-hmm. When you take a look at the show notes, there's a summary in there, link to the GitHub repository where you can get a list of changes, like how they've changed the optical flow and frame interpolation, among other things. So for those real diehard techies out there that want to really get into the code, the link to the official AMD announcement also has links which will give more explanation to the FSR technology. So, you never know, in the future I might have a Team Red graphics card. We'll wait and see. And if the rumors based on the next generation or anything, it's sounding like they might be some powerhouse cards coming.
Yeah, definitely interesting stuff, and love to see it coming out as open source. Makes it easier to implement. I guess one thing I'm curious about is there any future in trying to do something like running the Fidelity FX on an NVIDIA card? Is that even something that works? Can you do FSR on NVIDIA?
I believe you can, but whether it, I don't know how it compares off the top of my head to the NVIDIA solution. So I know they're working a lot with the AI type stuff to try to optimize their algorithms for various games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know historically the NVIDIA version of this, I forget what they call it, but the same thing, the upscaling for the longest time, it was a lot better over there. Be interesting to take a look at it and see what it looks like for AMD. But very cool. Okay, now, yes, Ken.
I'm just going to ask, you think VKD3D and DXVK will ever work with this version of FSR3?
Oh, yeah. It definitely will. Well, no, and even as funny as that sounds to ask, it will, because the FSR is on top of that stuff. So when you have improved rendering, all that does is going to make it even better for the FSR. So maybe instead of, say you have a 4K, you have a 4K display, maybe instead of having to render at 1080p, you can now render at 2K because of the improvements in the programs you mentioned, or the libraries. And now by having a 2K render, you have that much less interpolation that you have to do to scale it to 4K. So it totally works. And they talk about it works with other frame rendering technology.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I kind of poked at that about will it work on NVIDIA, because I think these technologies, it gets built into the game engine itself. It's not something that happens at the driver level. So you can. And
I'll ever have to worry about it being dual licensed.
Yeah, I don't know if you will or not. Depends. I didn't see what the license is that they.
I think that was a segue.
Oh, okay, yeah. The AMD stuff is MIT license, so probably not dual license. But you're right, that is a segue, and I totally missed it. That segue just drove right by me. And it's off. Thanks, to David. Yeah, appreciate that. But let's take it off to David to talk about dual licensing over at Redis. Take it away, sir.
All right. So first, a little bit of background. You may not be familiar with the term Redis. It is an in-memory database engine. I run into it a lot because I work in the small enterprise and DevOps worlds in Linux, and it's very useful for storing things in memory so that you can do inter-process and inter-server communication. One thing I use it for a lot is in highly reliable web servers, or where you're load balancing between different web servers and you need to know information about a client, no matter which server instance it happens to hit. So that's what Redis is. What's significant about what Redis is doing right now is one of those things that gets the open source community up in arms every so often, but then the open source community also has an answer to it. Mm-hmm. So they have, as of Redis 7.4, they have changed their licensing model yet again. They're changing to a dual license where they have their own Redis source available license, RSAL version 2, and the server-side public license, SSPL v1. The reason why this is something that many Redis users may not appreciate is because of the requirements of the license. To be able to use code licensed with SSPL or server-side public license, what you have to do is you actually have to supply your source code to end users, even if you're not supplying binaries. So if you're not actually shipping code, which everything that's software as a service where we're running it on servers and all you're doing is interfacing to it, we're not shipping binaries to the end user. But in this case, even in that, you still need to open source your software to the end user. And that's not something that a lot of companies want to do. But as I mentioned, the open source community has answers. One of those answers is called forking. So the Redis solution has been forked a couple of different times. There's one that uses the BSD license called KeyDB. And there's several other options out there mentioned in the register article that I linked to. KeyDB is probably what I'll be looking at for my implementations. Mm-hmm. But it's always interesting to see how the ecosystem continues to evolve, especially on the licensing side and the tension between charging for services and software. And, everyone that writes code needs to be able to eat, but balancing that with the open nature of open source there's always a tension there. So
yeah,
interesting article.
It is. So I went and did a little bit of looking into the SSPL, the server-side public license, and it is almost exactly the GNU Affero general public license, the GAPL, or the AGPL, excuse me. Just a few changes in it. But the big change is not only does it cover the binary itself, it covers the entirety of the software, but also APIs and other software that would be required for a user to run an instance of the service themselves. So it intentionally goes out and we talk sometimes about the GPL and the AGPL being viral, that it will infect, and of course I think that was Ballmer, somebody from Microsoft that first said it and was being derogatory, but it's not a terrible way to describe it, because it'll go out, and as you link to other things, the GPL will kind of touch those, and then it's supposed to, legally speaking, it falls under the umbrella of the GPL. The AGPL was an attempt to do that for software that only ran on the server side. Services on the internet where you've got some of it's in JavaScript, but a lot of it's going to be off running on the server. And under just the GPL, the stuff that runs on the server, it's not a binary that runs on the end user's machine. So that company has it is not forced to share the source code with its users. And so you have the AGPL that was an attempt to say, here's our program, it's covered under the AGPL, you can run it as a service, you can do software as a service, it can all stay on your server, you still have to push changes back up to the community. And I'm real curious why. Well, no, I know why. It's interesting to me that the folks at Redis didn't think that the AGPL itself would have been enough to prevent, kind of this, what'll happen is a company like Amazon will come along and say, hey, that's a nice database you got there. We're going to host it and start selling this as a service ourselves. And so a big company like Amazon could come in, undercut you on the price, and just sort of starve out the original company that makes the product. And so what Redis has decided to do here is they say, well, we'll take the AGPL, which is an open source license. It's like, we're gonna make this even more viral. It's going to be even stickier. And unfortunately, the way that they've done it, and it's one other thing to make clear, Redis did not write the server-side public license. That bit of ignominy actually goes to MongoDB, who was essentially in the same place. They had a piece of software. They wanted to be able to make money with it. They wanted it to be open source. And they turned it up to 11. And in doing it, the OSI and Red Hat and Debian and some other people have looked at it and go, this really does not meet the criteria of being free software anymore. It adds too onerous of a limitation. It's putting too many restrictions on what you can do with it. So it is unfortunate to see, first off, that Redis has gone down this path, but also I would say it's unfortunate to see that they feel that they have to. I think kind of something has gone wrong to get to this point.
What I took from the article that Barbie Barasoff wrote about this is that it is actually still going to remain freely available through the Redis Community Edition.
Now, what will the license be?
With it being dual license, the Community Edition is actually going to fall under the one that makes it source available.
So it's a source available license, but it is not an open source license. So the source available license is that server-side public license. And so what they're doing with that is they're saying, yes, we're going to give the source away. We're going to let everybody look at what's going on. But what they're really attempting to do here is, if some other business wants to use this as part of a business offering, then it's kind of this strong arm tactic to say, not only do you have to keep the source of the Redis part of your business available, everything else that is required to make that service work, you have to make available too. And that it's really sticky. So that potentially is going to mean your billing platform. Like a lot of businesses, they want to run with open source, but they've got their own home built code that does billing. Well, do you now have to open source all of your billing stuff? Does your CRM solution have to be open source too, because it ties into how billing happens? And I don't know. Maybe
not just that. I think where this really gets sticky is anytime you're developing a solution, there's always some secret sauce. Mm-hmm. There's something that makes your solution special, and because your solution is using Redis, it's calling their APIs. Now you have to publish the source code to your solution built on Redis, and you're basically exposing your secret sauce. And so that's why you wouldn't use it. And what they're trying to do is get you to get a commercial license from them for your solution, so that way they share in the revenues.
Yeah. Which again, I don't want people to misunderstand. Programmers need to eat too. It would be nice for Redis to be able to work on this open source project and make money from it. I mean, that is good. That is the ideal. It's nice to be able to program and make money, even if you do open source. But going to a source available license it always just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth, because the open source the open source definition was very carefully written the way it was on purpose. And I think over the years, time has proved that it got it right. So I'm always a little scared.
Even when it got it wrong, it got it right.
Well, I don't know that I would say they ever got it wrong. People have sure come along and suggested that for one reason or another that it's wrong, but all of those suggestions I find a little terrifying. So there you go. Show title, Programmers Need to Eat Too. Let's talk about this. I've got a story. Oh, yay. Linux has arrived. We're mainstream now, which means that we have malware to talk about. So I wish Rob was here. Rob, if you're listening, this one's for you. Here's a reason to not use the Snap Store, because it has malware on it. This is not the first time this happened. This has happened either. Story happened back in February that a series of Bitcoin wallets, one going by the title Exodus Wallet, was published to the Snap Store, and people used them, and then people got their cryptocurrency stolen because these wallets were phoning home and giving away people's cryptography information. So the stance that Canonical has taken with this is, We just don't have the resources to individually vet every entry on the Snap Store. And so it was sort of automated, which makes it particularly easy to push something malicious like this to the Snap Store. And I'm sure that part of their thought was, well, we sandbox everything really, really well. It's almost impossible to get something malicious on the Snap Store because sandboxes. Well, what maybe you might not realize is just because you can't fiddle with someone's system locally doesn't mean that you can't do bad things otherwise, like stealing the data that they give to your app. Now, there is something new, the second link from the notes, and that is a statement from Canonical, which is saying that they have a new policy where they're doing a manual review of all new Snap name registrations. So that essentially means someone comes along with a new application to add to the Snap Store. They're going to look at it much, much closer. And someone is going to put human eyeballs on it and not just sort of machine checking it, which is better. I can still see how that could be abused, but it's better. It's a step in the right direction. And I do get it that like Canonical is not Google. Canonical is not Apple. They do not have 1,000 employees to just review things on their app store. But at the same time, the Snap Store is not as big as the Play Store or the iOS App Store. So, and then one more little tidbit that goes along with this. I would love to rag on Snap, but Snap is not the only one that has this problem. KDE, not too terribly long ago, it was also discovered that there was a global theme. The gray layout, a gray indeed, a gray theme for Plasma KDE 6 apparently will delete all of your user-mounted drives data. It executes an RM --RF on your behalf. And this is sort of beginning a bit of conversation about the same problem, but over in KDE land, specifically with themes, because a theme can run a command, and themes do not get vetted. No human eyeballs look at these before they make it through. But this has been brought to the attention of the KDE developers. We have a comment on the Reddit thread from Pointed Stick, Nate Graham himself, saying, "Oh, this is terrible. For one, they have removed this theme altogether, but then they are also, as he says, discussing a path forward for making sure that this kind of thing can't happen." So we have arrived. There is now malware in our app stores, but thankfully things are happening. Steps are being taken to try to deal with that unfortunate reality.
Well, and I think some of this, and I'm going to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here about the Snap Store. I don't see that any different than, the Play Store or Apple's App Store or any multiple places, because whether it's a Snap Store or not, or say pulled it off of some repository somewhere that wasn't maybe the fully vetted, or I could see this coming in wherever. I mean, I don't see how, whether it's Snap or Flatpak or Image or a RPM or .deb package or whatever it is, really makes that much of a difference. Whenever money's involved, people are going to go after it. And I did like Shuttleworth.
For the days, days when they were just doing the malicious code just to get attention.
Yeah. Well, I do find, I found it interesting in that first article that you linked that, Shuttleworth said, he was commenting on this. Cryptocurrency is largely a cesspit of ignoble intentions, even if the mathematics are interesting. But he does comment and say he doesn't think that banning cryptocurrency apps helps, as if anything, it would make using Linux much worse.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, but.
Indeed. I think the reason that people are up in arms about this in particular is because Ubuntu and Canonical, they have elevated their Snap Store to basically the same, as far as I can tell, the way that they present it, the same level of trustworthiness as system deb packages. And it's just not. When you get a deb package has a trusted maintainer, and things on the Snap Store do not. Now it is fair to make the comment that you have this problem potentially in other stores, like Docker Hub has problems with malicious Docker images. I'm sure you find it in other places too. I know you have it as a problem on NPM and PyPy and all of those. So there's two sides to this coin, but I think the biggest problem is that, again, Ubuntu is putting the Snap Store out, basically pushing it to be on par with installing debs, and that is where I have a big problem with where this is at.
Oh, I could see that. My thoughts though are, I see people say, "Oh, don't use Ubuntu because of snaps and all that," and it's like my comment is, well, one, this is not something that comes standard. You have to load it in. And if you're doing something and loading in a program with cryptocurrency, you had better be really 10x sure that this isn't something bad, because no matter where you go, if it's dealing with cryptocurrency, even the exchanges you deal with, you have to be, triple sure is not near enough. That's a good start.
So I've got
the corruption is so bad.
Yeah, I've got a local customer here in town that I help him out every once in a while with stuff. And he called me up one day and he had a story. He's got apparently some money in Bitcoin. And he's like, I went to log in. I have this laptop. He goes, I have this laptop that is only used for accessing my cryptocurrency. I went to log in the other day and he told me a couple of weird things that happened. And he's like, and then a couple of days after that, I got a phone call out of the blue from someone that claimed to be my cryptocurrency broker. And they're like, we need to verify you are who you say you are. And he's like, I knew right away that it was weird. And then, something happened. Obviously it was a scam. And the guy hung up on him. So he calls me and he's like, do you think something happened with this laptop? I doubt it, but maybe. So anyway, he goes, here's what I'm going to do. I'll buy a fresh new laptop to do all my crypto stuff from, and we'll take this old one and we'll wipe it because it's no longer trustworthy. It's like, that's sort of when you're talking about this amount of money in cryptocurrency, that's sort of the approach you have to have. You've got to be that level of paranoid because there's a lot of money to lose, and also to it is enough money that you move from the garden variety of, let's send out 1 million spam messages and hope one person clicks on it, to you could actually get targeted attacks. Like if somebody knows that you have $1 million in cryptocurrency and they have your email address, they're going to try to come after you personally. And that's kind of it's one of those things that we as individual people, normal, regular citizens, we don't see very often. So yeah, it is worth that extra bit of paranoia.
Well, and I think a lot of people are used to having regulated financial institutions, and people go, well, it's not regulated, so therefore the government they aren't going to mess with me. But also the flip side of that, the sharp edge of the sword that's going to cut you is it's unregulated. So what happens, and there is nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
The government won't mess with you, but everybody else will.
Yeah. Pros and cons of that.
What I was
basically,
go ahead, Ken.
It's the same as choosing between to trust the bank to keep your money safe or putting it under the mattress.
Yeah, potentially. David?
So to kind of wrap up the crypto side of it, the other thing that may not be obvious to many people, and I only mention it in case anybody's thinking about dabbling in it, is the ledgers are publicly accessible. Mm-hmm. So you can know how much money is in a wallet, and then all you have to do is figure out who's associated with that wallet, which is why the whole LastPass hack issue was one of the big things that happened with that. But to kind of circle back around to the theme issue, I read the whole discussion on Mastodon where KD official was actually responding to some of that. And they mentioned the fact that they've got a banner when you go and select themes, and it said, the content available here has been uploaded by users like you and has not been reviewed by your distributor for functionality or stability. And they don't feel like that's a strong enough warning, but it's been out there. And then other people are saying, well, it didn't used to be out there and back and forth. But I think the Linux community, part of being open source is we've always been programmers on some level. Mm-hmm. So we've always had we're not afraid to peek under the hood. We're not afraid to dig into the code a little bit, check things out, play around, stuff like that. But as a community, we're reaching critical mass, and we're also trying to bring in less technical users. And so that's kind of one of those things that's cutting both ways, because we need to get to a place where we can differentiate between what you need some technical ability to be safe with and what is okay for you to just click on and accept. And that's something that I think we're still, just as a community as a whole, still struggling with finding the balance and things, because to bring in a reference I made in our back channel before, just because somebody gives you a recipe to something, you can't necessarily trust the product that they hand you. It may not match the recipe, or the recipe may have something in there that you didn't even know was a bad thing.
Yep. As I said, don't trust the brownies.
Well, one thing I do is, so for the non-technical people out there, for themes on KDE, unless it's got like 50 plus reviews, I don't use it. I wait till it's been out there for a bit. It's got a lot of people who have kind of already beta tested it. And I do that with a lot of apps. I don't do a ton of apps on my phone, for example, but until it's got a lot of usage, I don't mess with them.
Yeah, that's generally the way to go on any app store, really. Let somebody else be the guinea pig for a while. So let's circle back around and talk. Ken, let's talk about Playtron. This one is interesting because of the people involved in it.
Yes, it is. According to Saurav Rudra, gaming on Linux just gets better every year. He's writing about a new startup that aims to disrupt the Linux gaming space. There's a new venture led by Kirk McMaster of Cyanogen fame called Playtron. They are teasing Playtron OS as a Linux distribution tailored for powerful handheld gaming PCs and beyond. It will be based on Fedora Silverblue and support x86 and ARM CPU architectures. Try saying that one 3 times fast.
Yeah.
Saurav states they also intend to provide integration for every game store and many third-party integrations. There was also mention of something called Playtron Select that would enable any publisher to publish their games directly to Playtron. I'm just waiting to see when it actually comes out.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things here is one of the people behind this is Kurt. What's his name? Kurt McMaster? Is that what it said? Kurt. Yep. Kurt McMaster. I believe it's Kurt and not Kirk. I think it is a typo in the article here. Who was the CEO of Cyanogen, which, for those that don't know, Cyanogen was the company formed around the open source Android image Cyanogen mod. And the fun thing about this is when Cyanogen, the company, went under, Kurt was the one that got blamed for it. And I don't know how much was his fault or not. But he is quite a character in the open source world. But all of that aside, this is pretty interesting, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do with this. One of the things they bring out in the article that you linked is there is not a Steam store for ARM yet, and maybe Playtron can beat Valve to it, and it's a fascinating idea. It'd be interesting to see.
I could really see this taken off from the standpoint. I've heard from various social media sources that test the handheld gaming products that a lot of them that come with Windows, they said that it's just too bogged down and you need a gaming OS on it, something, whether it would, and now for them, they mentioned like an Xbox or a PlayStation or something like that. They did also mention Steam OS, where it's kind of really cut down for gaming, not, on these handhelds, quit trying to make it a full-fledged computer so much, at least on the Windows side. So I could see this taking off, and especially for Steam's competitors. So, you've got your Epic Store and, things like that, hey, we want to get our games out there. Hey, we'll use this, and we're not maybe having to deal with Steam.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that. All right.
And it could be a stepping stone for them to start coming out with their own versions of something like the Steam Deck.
Yeah, it could be.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking of.
I could see it. All right, let's talk Firefox.
I love Firefox, so let's talk about it. So I think I'm pretty much known as a big Firefox fan. So it's my browser of choice. Firefox 124 was just released, which means 125 is next up in the pipe and just hit public beta testing stage. So one of the new features that people are looking forward to is the URL paste suggestion, which, as explained by the developers, when the clipboard contains a URL and the URL bar is focused on, an autocomplete result appears automatically. Activating the clipboard suggestion will navigate the user to the URL with one click. So basically, when you have a URL in the clipboard, it will allow a one-click quick access without having to paste it into the URL bar. So the link in the show notes below actually has a picture of it in action. So if you want to see what it looks like. In addition to that, they're also rolling out highlighting and PDF documents, though I do say rolling out because this is being released gradually, meaning don't expect full functionality right away. It'll come in the next few releases before that happens. And they're in the actual official notes, they have a special picture in there saying that, yes, this is gradual release, so it's coming. In the name of security, Firefox is expanding their download protection for users. So downloads will be blocked proactively from URLs that are considered potentially untrustworthy. And Firefox now enables an option to use WPAD or Web Proxy Auto Discovery while configuring to use the system settings proxy. WPAD is a method to use to locate a URL of a configuration file using DHCP or DNS, and once found, it can be executed to set the proxy for a specified URL. Basically, it's kind of an auto config feature. A feature I'm sure that some of you are waiting for is Firefox now supports AV1 codec for EME or encrypted media extensions. Mm-hmm. Just like it sounds, it's for encrypted media, which means things like media playback for DRM wrapped content like streaming video. So this would allow other streaming video sources to be more compatible with Firefox. For users in Canada and the US, they'll be prompted to save their addresses so forms can be more easily filled out in the future. Think of users of Chrome have seen this before, where you're going to maybe purchase something from a website and you need to fill in your home address, type in your first name and a little box pops up, and then click on it and the rest of your address fields are automatically filled out. So that's what that's coming from. If you look at the link in the show notes, you also find in the article the Mozilla official release notes, where you can find other improvements which are mentioned. There's some bug squished, which I didn't cover, and there's also more stuff linked in the original article that I didn't cover on this one. But for anybody that wants the full details, the information's there. And I hope this will entice others to at least give Firefox a try, because I'd really hate to see a mono browser culture.
Yeah, I would too. It's unfortunate though, because Google is moving so much faster with Chrome than Firefox is. So for example, Firefox has no HDR support, and Google's had that in some version, in some iterations of Chrome for quite a while now. Firefox is just now getting AV1 support, which, I mean, good for them for doing it. But it's taken a while. And then there's even things like Firefox's WebRTC support, is extremely picky in compared to Google Chrome's. You can get away with a lot more with Chrome than you can with Firefox when it comes to WebRTC. So I mean, there's just some things about it that are hard to work with. I don't know if it's just a lack of, and some of this you really see when you start programming on projects that use some of these features.
And I was going to say I don't see that. And the AV one they do have they've had support for a while. It's the encrypted media extensions, though. I can play Hulu and Netflix and whatever. I've been able to do that for a long time in Firefox. So
yeah, you just not using the AV1 codec.
Yeah. But that's okay. Day-to-day use, I don't have problems with it. So,
and it probably is something like if you want the 4K stream, is probably where this really matters. Because I can imagine some of these services, because 4K is just so much data, they may have only an AV1 stream for 4K, and so if your browser can't do AV1, then you don't get 4K. Something like that is very feasible.
Right.
We'll see.
But I will put the caveat out there. I'm not a super heavy duty user. I don't program special projects or anything like that. I'm just clicking buttons.
Just a button clicker.
I'm just a button clicker surfing the web.
Yeah, it's fun. And that's set to come out April 16th, so still about 3 weeks away.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
And I can understand them staying away from April 1st.
Yeah, it's not a day you want to do a big release on. Yes. All right. So let's Alma Linux. David, let's talk Alma Linux. Are you an Alma Linux fan? Is this what you run on stuff?
Absolutely.
All right.
Love Alma Linux. So we get to wish the Alma Linux Foundation and Alma Linux a happy 3rd birthday. Not to dredge up painful experiences from the past, but when Red Hat decided to kill CentOS, Alma Linux, along with Rocky Linux, stepped up to fill the gap. Not to get off into the politics of it, but personally, I prefer Alma Linux and the way their organization works and the way they responded to it. Their focus on community. They have more than 25 separate corporate sponsors. They're governed by 8 board members from 3 separate countries, and they're always looking to be more inclusive. Another thing about Alma Linux that I really like, and they're not the only one, but still, non-traditional white males are underrepresented in technology, and Alma Linux is headed by a female, which I am very excited to see. I mean, I've got 2 daughters, both of who love to code, and I always like to see non-traditional roles being promoted. But Alma Linux themselves, as we look at going back on 3 years, their phrase this year is "no drama, just Linux," and that very much is their approach. If you followed some of the stuff that happened with Alma Linux when Red Hat continued to seem to put up barriers to allowing people to use their code and redistribute their code in the ways that CentOS had in the past, Alma Linux didn't really get out there and bash anybody. They just addressed the issues and dealt with it and kept moving forward with offering solutions to the community. They've got over 5 million Docker pulls at this point. They've got over 900,000 servers calling home to over 350 mirrors in the mirror system. They have over 400 foundation members. They have over 150 code contributors, over 70 companies contributing code. There are over 11 releases at this point, and they have 4 supported architectures. They're just continuing to grow, and we wish them well, definitely.
Yeah, I kind of Well, okay. For one thing, we interviewed Benny Vasquez on Floss Weekly back a couple of months ago. One of the early ones after we moved over to Hackaday, and that was great. Benny is a lot of fun. Enjoyed talking to her very much. And I kind of started with Alma Linux. I was toss up, ran some Rocky and some Alma Linux. But when Alma Linux got the fix out for Zenbleed so quickly, that's when they kind of won my vote. Because that was a potentially a big deal, and everybody, particularly Red Hat, was really dragging their feet on it. And Alma Linux is like, yeah, this is a problem. Here's a test patch that you can try, and like 24 hours later, they pushed it out to everybody. It was really impressive. Yeah, happy birthday to them. I'm a big fan of Alma Linux.
And I definitely like the a write-up that phosphorus.com did about it. I put the link in the show notes there for you.
Yeah, very cool. I like it. So, speaking of, well, birthdays, anniversaries, times on days on the calendar, I don't know. There's a segue in there somewhere. Fedora 40 beta is green-lit. So we've been talking a lot about Fedora 40 over the last few weeks. Obviously, I'm running it on the big machine behind me, and I've actually had very few issues with it. Pretty much all upsides for me. They did the go, no go meeting to go to Fedora 40 beta, and it went go. So Tuesday, March 26th, which is just 3 days away from when we are recording. By the time you listen to this, it may be out. Fedora 40 will be in beta. And for those of you that are a little less adventurous than I am, but still want to give it a look-see, I would say that the beta would be a great time to jump on board. If you want that RPM-based experience, and you want some sort of cutting edge, maybe not quite bleeding edge anymore, but cutting edge, it would be a great time to jump on. And then, you give it a couple more months, a few more weeks to bake, and the full-blown Fedora 40 release will come out. I don't have the date of that in front of me, but it's not too much longer. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I enjoy it. I've enjoyed my Fedora 40 time.
Yeah, I found it worked pretty good, but I didn't jump off at the right time, so I'm still on Rawhide plowing forward.
You're running Fedora 41 now. Oh,
yeah.
Fun.
So far, so good.
So back a few years ago, they made some changes, because Rawhide used to be real scary to run. And back a few years ago, they intentionally made some changes saying, we're going to try to make Rawhide a little less dangerous. And I think maybe when they introduced the compose feature. So now with Fedora on Rawhide, when someone pushes a package to it, it does not go live immediately. At the end of each day, they do what they call compose, which is where they promote those packages that have been pushed up to kind of the live Rawhide servers. And so there's one extra little step in there that sort of prevents too much breakage from making it through. And I think that's one of the things that have helped quite a bit. I would still not recommend anyone to run Rawhide on their production system, though.
Yeah, I have it on a second drive to jump over, do all the updates, play around for a while, and then jump back to my more stable OS.
Yeah, definitely the way to do it.
Rawhide will drag you kicking and screaming into the future.
Yeah, if you don't go run the command to switch over to something stable. So what is Rancher Prime, and what does it have to do with OpenSUSE? Well,
are you ready for Rancher?
I don't know. I don't know what it is. Tell me what it is. I'll tell you if I'm ready for it.
I grew up as a rancher.
I spent a few months helping out on a hobby farm.
From Rawhide to Rancher.
There you go.
Well, Sean Michael Kerner thinks it is prime time for SUSE, since SUSE updated its container management and edge computing platforms with a pair of releases that boost security and automation. We are talking about SUSE's flagship commercially supported container management platform. That's Rancher Prime 3.0 and SUSE Edge 3.0. As the name implies, it is an edge computing platform that optimizes the Rancher platform for edge of network deployments. The two new platform updates coincide with the first day of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation KubeCon Europe conference, which is being held in Paris. Rancher Prime is a collection of multiple open source technologies to help enable secure cloud deployments. The Harvester open source technology is the core element of Rancher Prime. Harvester enables hyper-converged infrastructure deployments, which are essentially highly optimized platforms that tightly integrate compute and storage. There is now virtual GPU support for virtual machines in the Harvester 1.3.0 update. Peter Smells, General Manager of Enterprise Container Management at SUSE, told SDX Central, another core element of Rancher Prime is security for cloud-native workloads, which is getting a boost thanks to the new Vector Prime 5.3.0 milestone. So, Jonathan, did I answer your question?
Somewhat. There's a lot of buzzwords in there, but I think we're getting at the answer. Cloud. It's cloud stuff. It's OpenSUSE's cloud thing.
And container management.
Well, yeah, but containers. That's cloud. The cloud is made of containers. That's how that works. No, interesting. Probably not something I'm ever going to run or work with, but for those that want it, yeah, it's all good.
Unless you get a customer that wants it.
I don't know that I'm ever going to have a customer big enough to need something like that. Anyway.
So you'd turn down Google if they came to your store asking for this?
Yes, I would. I do
that's
not.
Actually, a problem with. I'll say that's actually a problem for small businesses sometimes when they're too successful, when they're making little widgets or doing whatever coding, and someone goes, "Okay, I'm going to need 50,000 of these in 6 weeks," and
Yep.
Some of that stuff you got to say, "I can't do that."
Most important part of being a small business is knowing when to say no.
I can do 60,000. I can get you some of them in 6 weeks. I can't do both.
Yes. Yeah, David's point about saying no. I've also been told, and I wholeheartedly agree, that being a small business, the most powerful tool you have in your arsenal is the ability to say no. If you have a customer that's too demanding or too whatever, just being able to say, "I don't think I'm interested in doing business with you anymore." It's the best thing. All right.
Let's see, which enemy do I want to point you to?
And I would like to say for people listening later, if you were here live, that's the kind of probably some stories after the show that you would hear, kind of thing. So definitely listen live.
Yeah. I will give you a teaser for the after the show stories. Let's just say that I lost a customer and did not get raided by the FBI. So let's talk KDE then. Jeff, there are apparently 5 Linux distributions where you can try KDE. And there is, of course, 6. We all know that there's 6, but the article here only lists 5 of them.
Well, there's going to be a caveat there, because I even have that in my show notes, because I know you're going to be talking about it. So you have to be pretty new to the show to have not heard us talk about KDE 6. And some of you are probably tired of hearing about it, being Devout, GNOME, LXDE, XFCE, Unity, Mate, CDE, or some other desktop environment fan. But if you did think maybe it might be interesting to take a look at KDE 6, I have a list for you. The top 5 Linux distributions to try if you want to give KDE 6 a test drive right now. So it'll be coming. There'll be a lot more coming, but this will, some of them will take a little time to filter through the packaging and release schedules and whatnot. So this is the ones ready to go. So number 1, KDE Neon. So this comes from Ubuntu LTS as the very base, very stable. And then the KDE software is on a rolling release schedule. So the latest, greatest desktop software can be found on this distribution. It's maintained by a prominent KDE developer, and you'll want to use the user division User Edition, which is the stable released edition. The other ones are kind of a beta-ish, alpha beta, and then one is like nightly build, which is good luck with that if you're not a developer. OpenSUSE Tumbleweed. So this is a rolling release model to get, you get download a snapshot and then you just keep updating from there on out. So they use the RPM package manager and they have their own in-house graphical installer. If you are wanting the KDE version, you will need to go to the alternative download section, which will have the latest KDE ISO image. So we have number 3, KAOS. This is an independently developed distribution. KAOS 2024.03 comes with the latest Plasma 6 update and KDE Gear 24.02. KAOS is another rolling release, and it does use the Calamares installer, which can be found on a lot of different distributions. Neon is one of them. And it does have a unique setup for the KDE install by having a non-standard theme and layout. So it looks a little different, but if you like different, there's one for you. Number 4, Tuxedo OS. Now this is based on Ubuntu LTS and it's optimized for Tuxedo hardware. Tuxedo is a brand name computer maker out of Germany. And it also uses a Calamares installer, and you have your choice of X11 or Wayland at install. It also looks a little different because it comes with a dark theme, and being Ubuntu based, of course, it uses .deb packages. So a little familiar if you're on the Debian side. Cache OS is number 5. So this is a highly optimized distribution based off of Arch Linux. So it has a rolling release model as well as having regular ISO snapshots. KDE 6 is the default desktop. Cache OS has a lot of customization optimizations and has a version of the Firefox browser called Cache Browser. And it comes with a dark theme as well to match the OS. Now, this is for you, Jonathan. I know some of you are saying, what about Fedora 40? Well, it isn't released yet. It's still in beta. And this list is just released distributions. So if you're okay with beta and testing type of distributions, there's a lot more options out there, which I won't even try to go over, or we'll be here for a long time. But there will be a lot more options in the coming months to test KDE 6. But for those that don't want to wait and not wanting to run beta or a testing release, these are the options that should keep that hunger slated. And maybe after trying these, maybe might even make a convert out of some people.
So I am going to be a little cynical here, I suppose. At this point in the game, anything that ships KDE 6 is a beta quality release. It is that new, and there are still bugs being found in it. We are still banging the rust off. Yeah, I would consider all of these to be beta quality. And I don't mean that as a slam. I'm running, a pre-beta on my machine, but it is extremely new.
But KDE's beta, the rest of these,
it's not ready for production?
No, not really quite ready for production yet. Yeah, I don't. I would give it another couple of weeks before I would call it ready for production.
So I would say though, where something like Fedora 40, the entire distribution is in beta. These you could say, well, KDE 6 is in beta, but the rest of the distribution is not in beta.
That's fair, I suppose.
Are most of these like rolling releases?
Several of them.
A lot of them, yeah. Yeah.
All right. So there's our top 5. Let's talk. Oh yes, VirtualBox and KVM, David. This one fascinates me. There be things afoot, aren't there?
There are. I have to continue with my enterprisey DevOps kind of discussion.
Yeah.
And VirtualBox is a very easy introduction to virtual machines, completely cross-platform, runs on all operating systems, supports all operating systems as guests. But part of the reason why it's able to be so flexible is because it's not quite as bare metal as many virtualization technologies are, which means there's some inherent performance challenges with using it. Now, they've got a lot of different things that they've done already, but one of the things that has happened fairly recently is a company called Cyberus Technology out of Germany. They've got an interesting history. I was looking into them a little bit directly, but one of the things they did was they released a backend for VirtualBox that ties directly into Linux's KVM technology. So traditionally, when we use KVM virtual machines, we have to manage them with something like QEMU. I'm probably not pronouncing that quite right, QEMU, which is purely runs on Linux. In my situation, I've got a lot of developer users that run other operating systems. So we've traditionally run VirtualBox on their OSs that they use to do their development against, and then we have to run a KVM on the server to actually run their code. With this, we could run VirtualBox on the server possibly, still using the KVM backend, but allowing the users to have a server-side development environment that more closely matches what they're already used to on their desktop environment. So it's very interesting. It's definitely a little niche. It's something that not everybody would use, but if it's something you've got a use case for, I think it's pretty interesting. It does look like you would need to build both VirtualBox and the KVM backend from source. So it's definitely not necessarily entry level.
No, not entry level. Those are two packages that I have never built from source, and I've got quite a few under my belt at this point. So this is like fun though. I've done KVM stuff for a long time. When I very first started out doing virtualization, I think I did start with a couple of VirtualBox VMs, but pretty quickly was won over to KVM, and particularly using libvirt because it's all baked right into the Linux operating system. It's just right there, ready to go. You don't have to go install it or anything.
I still use VirtualBox.
Yeah, and like you said, it's it's easy.
Yeah.
So long as you're willing to go out and do the install from VirtualBox, at that point it's really simple to use. And they've also got some neat stuff like their guest editions for Windows is put together really well, better than the KVM ones, in my opinion.
So kind of interesting thing. We try not to make too much noise about it because they might realize and fix it. But VirtualBox is like the only Oracle product that is great in the open source community.
Yes. It seems like VirtualBox has filled this niche for several companies now. It's like, it's great. Don't tell them they've got it.
Well, and I can't comment on the performance really or anything like that. It's kind of, for me, it's all about ease of use because I fire it up once in a blue moon, use it for a little bit. I'm not doing any heavy lifting, shut it down, and I'm good for a long time. So it's not worth delving in real hardcore to.
Yeah, the performance is definitely good enough. We've got developers that write code against it, and then we're running like Alma Linux guests most often, and then we port that code over to KVM virtual machines for the actual production.
I imagine that porting process doesn't take a whole lot. It's mainly just looking for edge cases where they behave slightly differently.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've run into one of those in a long time, if ever.
Yep.
Yeah, I've tried there's supposed to be a way, and I've tried it where you can take a VirtualBox image and run it. I can't remember if it was KVM or QEMU or whatever that is.
Those two are sort of the same thing. They're not quite. They're like two different layers on the stack. But usually when you use KVM, you have QEMU in there as well.
Okay. Well, there's a way you can convert, and I never was able to get it to work. I could never get that translation to hold, and I never got my images to boot. I'd have to start over from scratch, and at that point I was already deeper into it than I that it was worth, you know.
Yep.
Yeah, we had the same experience, and this is a discussion for another show, but we use Ansible to just script the building of both the KVM machine and the VirtualBox machine.
Yeah, cool.
Well, and I've seen talks or discussions on the internet about using VirtualBox to take a bare metal OS and convert it into a VM to run.
Yeah, there's a couple of different ways to do that. It's easier if your guest is Linux. Trying to do that with Windows is more challenging. It's possible, but it's challenging. I've done it before, but it takes some work. All right. Let's move on and talk about actually our last story for the day, and that is Nova. And I am pretty excited about this one too. So Nova is newly announced. It's not ready. It's not even in the kernel yet. But Nova is a GPU driver written in Rust, being done by Red Hat, and it is for the NVIDIA video cards that use the GSP binary or the GSP firmware. So it's kind of your modern generations of NVIDIA cards. And the idea is that eventually Nova is going to take over from Nouveau for this new generation of video cards. Really interesting stuff. And so it's pulling, a lot of stuff from Nouveau, excuse me. It's an old habit to call it Nouveau. It's not that bad anymore. From Nouveau, but it's also pulling, from what I understand, from NVIDIA's new source code releases. And so trying to put those two things together for these new video cards. A couple stories I've got linked, the actual kernel mailing list discussion about it, which is not very long yet, but has the initial message from Danilo Krumrich. And then I also have linked the Phoronix discussion about it. But it's pretty interesting that we may be on the cusp here before too long of seeing reasonably decent performance out of NVIDIA cards on Linux without having to install the closed source kernel drivers. I mean, what is this madness? I'm ready for it. I would love to see it. I would love to live in a future where there's not only one real choice for video cards for Linux if you want them to just work. I would love to be able to consider NVIDIA video cards again.
Competition is good.
Yes, it is.
Well, actually, there's going to be more than one, right? Because you have this, but then NVIDIA is now building their driver off the open source code and maintaining the closed and open, but they're transitioning to only the open source kernel software.
A long process. And from what I understand, the new Nova driver uses some of that same infrastructure that they're building up for their open source driver. So I don't know if they're going to really live side by side on everybody's machines, or if Red Hat's going to go with Nova and everybody else is going to go with NVIDIA's thing, or maybe Red Hat is looking at the tea leaves and going, we don't think that NVIDIA is ever going to actually be able to land their driver in the kernel. I'm not sure. There's some open questions there. But I mean, either way, regardless of the reasoning, it points towards a brighter future.
Yes. Well, I was just meaning eventually, if NVIDIA follows through, then you'll have choices on what you want to run.
Yeah.
For example, this driver or the open NVIDIA.
Yes. Yep. Agreed.
And as a comparison, how long did it take for AMD to finally get full open source?
I don't remember.
Or are they still working on that?
I mean, it depends upon how you look at it, because there's still, in one way, there's still some closed source stuff that happens in their firmware. It's been described that the way that AMD open sourced their driver is that they moved all the stuff out of the driver into the firmware and put all the secret sauce in the firmware instead. So it takes a while.
Well, and it's no different than NVIDIA with, okay, they fully open source their kernel stuff, but their user side stuff is still closed source.
Yeah. And hopefully we'll get to the point to where that's not the case anymore. It would be nice to not have to install any closed source userland drivers either. We will see.
And we'll need to ask Keith's 512 to keep us up to date on what he finds with testing that NVIDIA drivers in the new Linux kernel 6.9 RC1.
Yeah. Let us know what you find. Want to let folks know what we found for tips for this week? No. I think we better. We'll be stuck here in the show if we don't go to tips. Let's let Ken kick it off. And you've got, now I see your tip here and I'm trying to remember, is this the file system bind? Is this bind the DNS thing, or is it something else? What are we binding, Ken?
Well, this is the Bash's built-in bind for key mapping.
None of the above. That's funny.
Today, I am introducing, as I said, Bash's built-in command bind. It can be used to customize how Bash responds to keys or a combination of keys being pressed on the keyboard. Did you realize that Bash's default key map is the standard Emacs style key mapping? You can use this bind's -m option to change the key mapping scheme to Vice style key mapping. -L will list the names of bindable editing functions. And Jonathan, if you'll bring up my screen share, I'll show what some of those are.
All right.
Oh, that's not L. There we go. And so I can scroll through that. I'm going to go ahead and pipe that into less. And this is starting at the beginning. You can see you've got abort, backward kill line, backward kill word, as well as, and I'm going to jump back down to the end, where you can do yank last argument, yank int argument, yank pop, are some of the things you can
bind to whatever keys you want. That's cool.
Thank you.
Yes. I am well acquainted with this collision of the tongue inside the mouth. Very cool.
And if y'all remember when I did the terminal bookmark, that uses bind in the back end to do some of what it does.
Very cool.
Like the Control T for bringing that up, and the Control L up, or not Control L, Control Space. And you'll see I've got one command there where I'm binding Alt U to do a update and upgrade. I'm going to go ahead and run that.
Running an upgrade live on camera? Oh, brave.
No, I did it before the show first.
Fun.
Actually, all I'm doing right there is running the command to bind.
Oh, there you go.
Then all I have to do is Alt U, and it asks for the password.
Nice.
And if I hit exit, it'll just cancel it out.
Gotcha. Very cool. Let's go to Jeff and YQ.
Yeah, this is a little different. It's a command line YAML, JSON, and XML processor. Well, it also handles CSV, TSV, and it works. If you're familiar with the JQ command, it works very similar. It's written in Go, and basically it's for manipulating those files. So you can, read values, you can pipe values. I'm not going to go through everything. I mean, you can merge multiple files. You can convert. You can, for example, you can convert a JSON to a YAML file, and the link in the show notes is to the GitHub. So if you're working with these file types, here's a good way to actually manipulate them just from the command line.
That is very fascinating to me. I do work with YAML files from time to time, and this could be useful. Actually, this could be really useful for some things that we do. I will look into this in much greater depth. Do you know, is it available in like Ubuntu or any of the major distros by default?
I do not know.
I will look into that too.
Well, actually, I can tell you right now. Yes.
There you go.
Sudo apt install YQ.
Cool. I will have to make that happen and take a look at it. It could be helpful for some documentation. You know, we run something in Meshtastic that uses a YAML file to configure it, and we occasionally get people coming in and saying, I did this or I did that, and it doesn't work. I'm like, how many spaces do you have? You do realize that YAML is white space sensitive, right? Oh no, I didn't know that. All right.
YAML is just very sensitive.
Well, sometimes it is. At the same time, though, in my opinion, it makes for really, really nice, neat config files. So long as you realize that it's case sensitive, and you sort of set it up in a way that it's hard for people to shoot themselves in their foot. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, I use YAML with Ansible all the time.
Yep.
But I still like to pick on it.
That makes sense. All right, well, David, let's talk about Ramina. What is this?
Ramina. So it's not command line, but it is a tip. And it stays with my theme today of enterprise sorts of things, back in DevOps sorts of things. It is a remote access screen and file sharing for your desktop. It's Libre, it's copylefted. It's been out there for a long time, but one of the really coolest things about it is you can basically, if you need remote access, you can do it through this app. It supports RDP, SSH, Spice, which we haven't really talked about Spice, but when you're dealing with like KVM virtual machines, the direct access to the screen or to the console, the graphical console, is through Spice. VNC, which I assume VNC's been mentioned, but it's a very common graphical access between machines, along with X2Go and a few others. But it's plugin based, so if you're using something esoteric that doesn't have native support, there's a good chance that someone in the community has released a plugin for it. The interface itself, it's got a grouping structure, so you can group your connections. So in my case, I can group them by client and then by different category inside those clients and things. So it's very flexible, very handy, and I use it probably multiple times a day to remotely connect to different machines and things.
Yeah, this looks really fascinating. Now, it's Linux only?
Yes.
No installing it on Windows. Okay. There's a few places where having a something that'll talk Spice would be nice to be able to put on a Windows machine.
Yes. And that I wanted it on. I needed something on Windows one time, and I went to them first, and it wasn't there. So.
But I will say I've used Remina quite a bit. It's an awesome program.
Cool.
Yes, it is.
I have not used it yet. I will have to take a look at that as well. It probably would work through WSL though, like WSL2.
Possibly.
Probably.
Might be something to try.
A lot of things do. In fact, I'm thinking about going and installing that for a customer here in the next couple of weeks. Something on WSL2 to be able to get them into a Spice machine.
It seems like Remina is probably best described as like the VLC of remote desktop sharing. It's like, I got this weird thing. I wonder if it'll connect. Oh, look, there it does.
Yep.
Yeah, you can see that.
Yes.
Fun. All right. Well, I've got a tip as well, and mine is the continuation of how to resize the virtual machine disk when it's an LVM. So last time we did the physical volume resize, PV resize. So this week we're going to resize the logical volume inside the physical volume. We're getting close to the end with this, actually. And so the two commands I have on here is LV scan, and that will give you the list of logical volumes that the computer knows about. And chances are it'll be the only ones listed there. are the ones that you're actually looking at. And so that'll be something like /dev/ and then the name that was assigned to the logical volume. A lot of times it'll be the same name as the host name that you set up during install. So in my case, the particular device that I was looking at this time, it was just named CentOS. And it was the home, not folder, not directory, volume, just the home volume, mounted at home that I wanted to resize. So the resize command actually looks like lv resize --L, which that's an interesting one. And then plus 100% free, which is also interesting. And then the name of the logical volume. So with lv resize, that -L says, I'm not telling this to you in bytes. I'm telling this to you in, I believe it's sectors or extents, something like that. But this, when you use -L, it lets you use this magical invocation, this plus 100% free, which basically says all of the free disk space that you can get to, use all of it. So set to max size, because otherwise you have to do what I did the first time I went through this. And there's, okay, add a terabyte. Okay, I didn't give you a full terabyte. Add 900 gigabytes. All right, now add 5 more. Add 4 more. Add 1 more. Okay, you can't do 1 more. Add 500 megabytes. And you just kind of sneak up on it, which is a real pain to do. So plus 100% free when you do an LV resize, which is pretty handy. All right, fun times. Thank you guys. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to give each of you a chance to get in the last word, and we'll go from left to right on my stream deck. That's right to left on your radio dial. We'll start with Jeff.
Not much to report this week, so error message cannot completely convey. We now know shared loss. Have a great week, everyone.
David.
How do I follow that?
I don't know.
No. Actually, I do.
You don't.
He has to, though. It's his turn.
I want to plug a specific episode of Floss Weekly coming up April 3rd.
Yes. It's going to be fun.
Dang, my mind just went blank. But Joshua Culp with the Asterisk project is going to be talking about Asterisks. That's one of my open source passions as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to be in the audience cheering them on and throwing snide comments. So definitely.
Yes, I will get some tech support stories about Asterisk too. I've done some crazy things with Asterisk over the years, some successful, some not, but that is a story for then. All right, Ken.
I just wanted to let everybody know that Y9.5 was released with more feature work. We've got the link in the down the rabbit hole in the show notes if you want to read about it. And we'll probably thread some of that out since we already covered some of it.
Yeah, I don't think we need to have 25 stories in the down the rabbit hole list.
But I also wanted to share with everybody that this is my second week coming to you via MX Linux on Raspberry Pi 5.
Yes, that is very impressive that little Pi 5 is doing as well as it is with that. I'm kind of excited that you're making that work. It's fun. All right, thank you guys.
So I've got it.
Appreciate.
So I finally got a dedicated podcast system.
There you go. Thank you guys for being here. And I also want to say to our audience, thank you to everyone live listening. Thank you to everyone on the download. We sure appreciate it. The only real thing I have to plug is keep up with my work over at Hackaday. We've got the security column goes live on Fridays. And then Floss Weekly, we record on pretty much every Wednesday. We've got one Tuesday coming up in the mix. We'll let folks know about that when it gets a little closer. Hope to see you there. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the Untitled Linux Show. Hey, enjoy the show, but really feel like you're missing out? Want to be able to see our smiling faces or cooperate with the Discord? Well, you need to check out Club Twit. It's only $7 a month to get you the Discord, it gets you ad-free versions of all the shows, and it's a way to directly support Twit. You need to get on Club Twit.